At this time, we're back. Kyle Gracey is here, a podcast veteran with me. He came on my old podcast back in the day. Kyle, good to see you again. I'm glad we can talk on this one about hiring. You proposed a really good topic I want to touch upon, which is the recruitment and the hiring of executive directors and thinking of it more from a board member lens. Kind of give people the scoop on how you ended up knowing a lot about this topic.
Yes. So early in my professional career, I started applying for and serving on boards of directors, and
Hmm.
especially nonprofit boards of directors. And so over the last couple of years, I have served on about a dozen nonprofit boards of directors, including being the chair of about half a dozen of those. So on almost all of those boards, one of the things that I helped to manage and be a part of was recruiting and hiring executive directors.
So what I'm curious about is, in my role, I'm on staff to hire and recruit people. Like my job is to lead the team that finds all the people. Boards, especially nonprofit ones, not necessarily guarantee that anyone will have a background in that. And
That's
so,
right.
more often than not, is that true? And if so, how do you even know where to start putting a process together?
It really depends on the board. One thing that boards should be thinking about when they're selecting and recruiting for board members is, are you bringing on anybody who has experience recruiting executives or hiring executives? So, as you're thinking about your skills matrix there, that's one step that you can do to improve the process, make sure that people on the board actually do have that background. But even if you don't, one thing that you can, of course, do if you have the resources is to hire an executive recruiting firm and get you some outside support for that. The second thing you can be doing is looking at your upper level staff on your in your organization. So if you have a COO or someone of that level who has experience with executive hiring, they can help you with that as well. But otherwise, it's not terribly different from the way that you would recruit or hire for other positions, especially if you're recruiting or hiring for more senior level positions in other staff. The big difference is you want to think very carefully about the role of how the executive director is going to interact with the board and how the board is thinking about what it needs from an executive director and what it's going to give to that executive director to support them.
So more often than not, do you feel like boards have, I guess, a weak, it might not be the right word, but like a weak relationship in that the executive director is more powerful, all powerful? Or do you feel like nonprofit boards tend to have a very strong board that is very much involved in the day-to-day life or the month-to-month life of an executive director? What's the kind of power balance you see more often?
It ranges a lot. It's very easy to either be a micromanaging board that's telling your executive director what to do rather than focusing on the governance of the organization and letting them focus on the management. But I also see boards that are far too hands off and aren't actually holding their executive director accountable to any metrics or performance or even the mission of the organization in some cases. But I also see plenty that do a good job and that have a middle ground where they have a clear separation of duties between what they're responsible for, again, the governance of the organization, versus what the executive director is doing and making sure that they're managing the staff and managing the day-to-day operations. And that also at the same time, while they're doing that, they're also asking the executive director, what do you need? How can we be supporting you? What kind of goals are you looking for in your position? And how can we help you to achieve those? So in that way, it's very similar to what a good manager should be doing in any other role. The difference, of course, is that you are a group of people rather than one manager. And so you have to think carefully about that overall relationship.
So let's say a nonprofit board engages a search firm, that search firm signs on. What are your must-have parts of a process? Do you have panel interviews? Do you have performance tasks? Like what things do you know have really worked for you, and what things would you counsel people to avoid putting in their process?
Yes. So I think important things are having a process where your search firm really understands the kinds of needs that you have from your executive director and how they might be different from just a boilerplate leadership description
Hmm.
that any organization might be looking for. So make sure they really are getting to know your organization and your specific challenges and strengths. Secondly, having a recruitment and interviewing process that is getting at how the executive director is going to integrate with the rest of the organization. How are they going to work with the staff? How do they approach board and executive relationships? What's their style? And how do they think about the culture of the organization? And how have they worked in previous organizations? So you really want to get at that fit very carefully, not just looking at how many dollars have you fundraised or what kinds of programs have you run, even though those are, of course, also very important.
And when you're thinking about rubrics and scoring throughout the process, because those can be really valuable, especially to eliminate bias,
Mm-hmm.
how do you advise boards to think through that kind of scoring piece? Is it left up to the search firm? If there's no search firm involved, is it left up to one person on the board? How do you ensure there's kind of a robust and fair scoring method for all these candidates so that you're not, I know this person, they seem great, or they have this bullet point on their resume that must be worth our time? How do you kind of smooth out some of those rough edges?
Yeah. So, one, definitely you should be using scoring metrics and sort of quantitative indicators, not to just answer your questions, not picking the person who's zero point zero 0.05 points higher than the other candidate, but it gives you some guide. And as you said, it reduces that bias and gives you some quantitative thinking. But you shouldn't leave it up just to your search firm. You, as all of the board members, should be engaged in that process of thinking carefully about what you're needing. And you really should be engaging your staff and asking them, too, what they need. So that should be a board level, a whole board exercise with everyone's input. And then if you do have a search firm that you're working with that can give you some perspective on what they've seen in other organizations, certainly take their advice or listen to their advice too. But again, you need to reflect on what does your organization need and what's that delicate balance of different skill sets that, while they might be similar across organizations like, leadership management, fundraising, operational skill, risk management, the percentages or the weights, if you will, might be a little bit different for your organization in the current moment or in the next couple of years that executive is going to be there versus some other organization that just might be, in subtle ways different, because even those little differences in weight can make a difference when you're thinking about that. And then, of course, you want to be thinking about what are unique elements that we're dealing with right now? What are things we're expecting to be dealing with or might hope we're not going to, but might have to deal with in the next few years, and build in that into, your evaluation and your weighting as well.
I feel like sometimes even when the search process and the interview process works really well, the candidate signs on, everyone's excited, but the onboarding piece is kind of botched, or the first 30, 60, 90 days. How have you ensured that process is smooth so you didn't just waste all your time and set someone up for failure when they're actually the right person?
Right. So number one, you should be developing a clear onboarding process. And I actually recommend thinking a lot about that when you're developing your hiring process and sort of your description, because you're thinking about how can I integrate then what we've just said or what we're developing in terms of our skill sets. How are we going to actually make sure that those skill sets and that awareness of the organization's position is incorporated into the very first information that this executive is getting, which will also help you when they have questions during the interview process. But one thing I really recommend is having a conversation with your new executive soon as they start to set out 30, 60, 90 day goals. Where do they want to be developing in that first period of time? And what do you want them to have accomplished or gotten up to speed on during that period? So one, I do recommend having sort of probationary periods just so you can all make sure that the fit is working really well for you, and do really clear goal setting where you are co-developing with your executive, those benchmarks and those milestones over that initial period. And also, if you do already have goals that the organization has set or objectives and key results that you've already set, make sure you're cluing in your executive, before, as they're coming in, on what those already are, both so that they can be contributing to them even as they're working on their own goals, or they can be giving you early feedback on, hey, this really isn't what I think we should be setting our objectives around for this period, given that I'm coming on. So make sure that they have the full context of where the organization already is, and make sure that you're listening to them about what they want to be building and developing what needs they have, while also setting clear understandings with them of what you need to see to feel good about this new hire.
Yeah. Hey, last thing, you've honed a lot of this knowledge over years, probably working on it, so you got a lot of hands-on experience. If somebody doesn't have that, any books you recommend or resources that you would advise folks to check out to try to learn this world of nonprofit or board management overall?
There's one book that I really like, which is How to Launch a High Impact Nonprofit. It's a big tome, but I recommend it. Secondly, plumb your networks. So you've got to have people that you're connected to who have been on boards, have been successful with this. I'm happy to make referrals or recommendations to people. Use the existing network you have. You'll always be surprised at how many people already have the experience that you're looking for or know somebody who has that experience. So just be open and asking around and saying, I need help with this. We're looking for experience. We want to do this really well. Who do you know who already has this?
Yeah, well said. How can folks find you if they want to reach out?
Yep. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Kyle Gracey. That's the easiest way to connect with me, and you can see the board service that I have to offer.
I suspect you'll be getting a lot of questions. It's definitely a hot topic amongst our listeners. Kyle, thanks for coming on, and thanks everyone for listening. You can find all past episodes of At This Time, all the places you get your podcasts, and of course, find us in stunning 4K on YouTube. Until next time, catch you soon.
Thanks, Eric.